A few weeks ago, I described faith as a muscle. Because faith is God-given. It's something that we're born with, much like the muscles of our body. But failure to exercise our faith, to give it proper nourishment, can leave our faith weakened. One way we exercise our faith is by wrestling. A theme found in our first reading, but also in our gospel reading. Jesus lifts up the widow as a model for prayer, to be persistent. And the story of Jacob reminds us that we will struggle with our faith. We will have doubt and fear, regret and pain. And there will be times when it seems to separate us from God. So again, in Luke's gospel, we hear the parable of the wronged widow seeking justice from a local judge. Her persistent badgering finally persuades the judge to do the right thing. But our English translation of this parable is not strong enough. Looking at the Greek, the widow is doing more than simply begging or annoying the unjust judge. The Greek word for wear me out is actually more violent. I better do this before she beats me up, before she leaves me black and blue. The Message translation of the Bible does this justice. The unjust judge said, I care nothing about what God thinks, even less what people think. But because this widow will not quit badgering me, I better do something so that she sees justice. Otherwise, I'm going to end up beaten black and blue by her pounding. Jesus had a sense of humor. The point of the story is that the widow will not take no for an answer. She is willing to wrestle with the judge to get what she wants. She's been wronged, and she wants justice. And she will not leave the judge until he grants her request. As I said to the children earlier, you have to imagine that this woman would be sitting on his doorstep at night, that she would be waiting for him outside of his workplace, that she would be pounding on his door, grant me justice. And while she's not literally wrestling, she's not really invoking violence to get her way, she is being persistent, relentlessly and uncomfortably persistent. Wrestling is a part of our faith journey. And when we wrestle, we grow in faith, and we are changed. And the story of Jacob wrestling with God makes this point quite clear. Now, we don't have the whole story from Genesis, so I'm going to back up and tell you a little bit about what's happening at this point in Genesis. Jacob is coming home after 20 or so years. The last time he saw his brother wanted to kill him. Now he sent some of his people on ahead of him, and they said, Esau is coming and he's bringing 400 men with him. So Jacob is afraid. He is uncertain. He is racked with guilt and shame for what he did to his brother, and he's fearful. So he starts sending all of these gifts of camels and sheep and goats ahead of him and say, give these to my brother. Tell him I can't wait to see him. And then he divides up the rest of his camp, sends them in different directions, and finally he sends his wife, his wives, the 2 concubines, and all of the children across the river so they'll be safe. And Jacob is left there overnight alone, wrestling with all of these thoughts in his mind, wrestling with his guilt, wrestling with his fear about what may come. Will his family be safe? Has Esau forgiven him? Will there be peace in the land that God gave his grandfather? Land that God gave to his father, Isaac. Land that God promised to Jacob as well. We tend to want to read this literally. But I believe the power in this story is not in the literal wrestling with God, but in that idea that we wrestle with God in our minds, late at night, with all of our worries and fears and concerns. In this story, we are reminded that God comes to us. God comes to us. We don't need to go out searching for God. God comes to us in our worry, in our fears, in our guilt. God meets us where we are. I know we've all had sleepless nights, wondering, worrying about what the morning may bring, and I hope that this story will bring you comfort and peace. Because like Jacob, we are not alone in those moments. God comes to us, wrestles with us, and then sends us into the morning with a blessing. Jacob still didn't know the outcome of his reunion, but he had a blessing. This encounter with God gave him the strength to face his brother. But before the man left, before God disappeared, he touched Jacob's hip. He walked with a limp for the rest of his life. That reminds us that when we encounter God, when we wrestle with God, we will be changed. We will walk in the world differently because of this encounter. Wrestling with God is not risk-free. It can be dangerous. It can be painful. But we have the promise that when we wrestle with God, we will be changed. We will be transformed. So here this morning we have two important lessons about prayer. Because isn't that what we're doing at nighttime when we're wrestling with our thoughts? In the first one, Jesus gives us permission to be persistent. Jesus gives us permission to wrestle, to pound on God's door, to demand what we want. And Jesus commends the widow for her persistence. And Jacob's story reminds us that God meets us where we are. And that with this encounter, we will be changed. And these ideas about our relationship with God are confirmed in the life and the ministry, the death and the resurrection of Jesus. In Jesus, God comes to us where we are. God literally takes on the flesh of humanity to meet us where we are. And Jesus wrestled with us. He challenged our religious practices. He challenges our understanding of neighbor and our ideas about God. On the cross, it seemed as if evil had won, as if God had lost. But with the coming of the morning light at the resurrection, God reminded the world that the world will never prevail over God. And the world was forever changed. The resurrection of Jesus changed everything. And no matter how many have tried to silence the gospel, the story keeps being told. Brothers and sisters, God will not leave us alone. God will not abandon us. And if we do not go to God, God will come to us. God will engage us, wrestle with us, and we will be forever blessed because of it. Amen.